What is going on in the mind of the man who might be the Unabomber?
Last week, 53-year-old Theodore Kaczynski emerged in the white-hot glow of the spotlight.
The most dangerous serial bomber in U.S. history. Along with the latest bomb, he sent 3 letters. The letter says the bombings are the work of a group that hopes to promote instability in industrial society. The bomber says he will stop if a long article he's written is published in a major U.S. publication.
In case you haven't been keeping up with radical domestic terrorist history, the Unabomber was sort of a big deal back in his day. He sent bombs through the mail to various targets in big tech, travel, media, and advertising for over 17 years, killing 3 people and injuring 23. Finding the Unabomber, who was later revealed to be PhD, Harvard-educated genius Ted Kaczynski, became the FBI's longest, most expensive manhunt ever. So, why are we talking about this murdering psychopath? Because before Kaczynski was caught in 1996, he released his manifesto, which accurately predicts the dystopian future we inhabit and perhaps beyond. Kaczynski's manifesto has been compared to 1984 and Brave New World. UCLA professor James Q. Wilson wrote of it, quote, "The Unabomber Manifesto is a carefully reasoned, artfully written paper. If it is the work of a madman, then the writings of many political philosophers, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Tom Paine, Karl Marx, are scarcely more sane," end quote. We are not condoning Kaczynski's actions, but his high IQ gave him insights into trends in technology and media not visible to the everyday person. Let's go over the best, or perhaps worst, of them and what they could mean for crypto, AI, and society in general. I'm Isaiah McCall, and this is Were the Unabomber's Predictions About Technology Correct? Modern society is radically different from what we evolved from. Kaczynski wrote under Section 46 of his manifesto that modern society requires people to live under conditions radically different from those under which the human race evolved. Quote, "Among the abnormal conditions present in modern industrial society are excessive density of population, isolation of man from nature, excessive rapidity of social change, and the breakdown of natural small-scale communities, such as the extended family, the village, or the tribe." In other words, will anyone say hi or help their neighbor in 10 years?
Hi, how are you?
I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but please come in.
What about imagination? Is that going away if we don't use it? Ted argues that an over-reliance on technology is bad for the human spirit, and the repercussions are high if the technology we are resilient on breaks down in a crisis. The modern civilization we've created is unnatural, and we behave unnaturally within it, almost like animals in a zoo. You might say, well, Isaiah, as crypto investors, the digital world is what we know. Well, this might be normal for us, but on a massive scale, Kaczynski argues that technology creates an environment that is not meant for human beings to inhabit. This will create widespread feelings of inferiority and psychological suffering. Where do you think we go next as the world begins to rely more on crypto and AI? Let us know in the comments below. That leads us to Kaczynski's point about the existential dangers of over-socialization, especially if you're on the left wing of politics. Many of us are over-socialized, according to Kaczynski. In Section 6 of his manifesto, he argues, we're made to feel extremely ashamed of our natural impulses, such as lust, hatred, and candidness, leading to more feelings of guilt and powerlessness in the system. Quote, "The moral code of our society is so demanding that no one can think, feel, and act in a completely moral way." End quote. Kaczynski believed left-wing political correctness would dominate the modern world, and that an Orwellian newspeak would emerge. He asked a simple question: who gets to define what is hate speech? You? Me? The Ministry of Truth?
We learned last week that the Department of Homeland Security has established a Ministry of Truth. They're calling it the Disinformation Governance Board. How Orwellian.
Ted wanted to be able to communicate. If that means being as direct and offensive as possible, then do it. It's better than real-world violence, right? Ted K on the meaning crisis. People need to take part in something called the power process, Kaczynski says, which is putting serious effort into attaining a goal they know is important. For our ancestors, this would be finding food and satisfying biological needs. In the modern Western world, it's a bit more complicated than that. Modern industrial society makes the fulfillment of biological needs trivial, requiring only obedience to survive. Because of this, people engage in meaningless activities like buying the latest consumer goods, doing the endless social media scroll, corn, becoming a Disney adult, and social activism for non-issues. It's not that these are all useless things, but you're unlikely to find meaning in them. It's why we'll often tell you to touch grass after spending too much time crypto trading or watching one of our amazing videos. If crypto isn't your life's purpose, you need to go out there and find it. Here's a quote from Ted about this. When one does not have adequate opportunity to go throughout the power process, the consequences are boredom, demoralization, low self-esteem, inferiority feelings, defeatism, depression, anxiety, guilt, frustration, hostility, spouse or child abuse, insatiable hedonism, abnormal sexual behavior, sleep disorders, eating disorders, etc., etc., and etc. Kaczynski also argues that mass production makes all products the same and global homogenization makes all places the same. According to Teddy, can I call him Teddy? I'm gonna call him Teddy. Our society traps us in a rat race where our environments are similar and interchangeable from one another. It's why a cubicle feels like every cubicle you've ever been in before. Or why even Google or Apple's futuristic offices don't impress people anymore because they're the zeitgeist now. Lastly, Teddy argues that college is a useless scam. College professors enjoy the illusion of rebelling, and that is all. And it's at the cost of the college degree premium, which is dying, and higher education, which is increasingly being exposed as a scam. As Teddy puts it in section 27 of his manifesto, the university intellectuals play an important role in carrying out the system's trick. Though they like to fancy themselves independent thinkers, the intellectuals are the most over-socialized, the most conformist, the tamest, and most domesticated, the most pampered, dependent, and spineless group today. That's a mouthful. Does it sound like anybody you know? According to Ted, college professors play a key role in helping their students become dependent on the system and incapable of any meaningful rebellion. Finally, here's Ted's most important argument outlined in the Unabomber manifesto. Technology is imposed upon you. Ted concludes the manifesto by stating that the reason technology wasn't a significant problem until recently is that throughout history, tech always felt somewhat in our control. Even the pioneers in the mid-1800s felt as though they controlled their own destiny, despite living through the Industrial Revolution. If technology was imposed upon them, such as the steam engine, telegraph, and cotton gin, the benefits and negatives were very clear. The same cannot be said today. A recent study from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry found that almost all US teenagers use social media and, on average, spend nearly 9 hours a day online. We don't own technology, the technology owns us. You don't need to watch the documentary The Social Dilemma to figure that bit out. Here are two examples of how tech imposed itself that Teddy brings up. The first being cars. Gradually, as the technology got more advanced and more people started buying cars, cities suddenly had to be designed around the use of cars. We're at the point where people who didn't even want a car need one. When I lived in Oklahoma City, they barely had sidewalks. The system would break down if we got rid of cars. So it's important that everyone involved has a car and uses it. The other example is computers. When they first started out, Ted describes computers as expensive toys, but then they got more advanced. Eventually, the government started using them, then consumers, and now you can't go through life without a computer. And I'd argue one more example, your phone. Your phone is like a little demon stabbing you in your abdomen to check it every 5 minutes. I like this artwork by American photographer Eric Pickersgill, who photoshopped away smartphones in a series of photos that show just how pathetic we are looking down at our phones all day. In closing, I'm not a Luddite, so I agree with 95% of what Ted Kaczynski says. Things like computers have enabled us to learn an unprecedented amount of information. And the key part Ted is missing is the solution. Ted Kaczynski thinks we need to revert to a more naturalistic, small, community-driven society after we overthrow the system. That's not gonna happen. Technological comforts are greater than the revolution, but there is one solution. Technology makes life easier and tempts people away from their purpose. It's why the greatest philosophers all agree you need something driving you. Viktor Frankl believed it was a spirit of meaning. Alexander Solzhenitsyn believed it was a spirit of telling the truth. Dostoevsky, a spirit of love over logic. Jung, of self-actualization. And Freud believed we were driven by an unconscious fear of death. In the pursuit of one of these, you can forge your own way against the system. Something Nietzsche said would take being a Superman or Ubermensch to do. I don't want to be too flippant, but it might take us becoming super beings through education, discipline, and physical pursuits to handle the burden of technology. Or at least if we want to be able to adopt the benefits and be able to handle the negatives. Anyway, I'll leave you with one last quote from Teddy K. Scientists are unaware of, or choose to ignore, the fact that when large changes, even seemingly beneficial ones, are introduced into a society, they lead to a long sequence of other changes, most of which are impossible to predict. The result is disruption of the society. Ted Kaczynski.